Hello, you're watching Tell It Like It Is, and my name is Kathy Bennick. Today's show is called Back to Congress, and my special guest is Congressman Frank Guinta, who has served as our congressman from New Hampshire's 1st Congressional District for the past 2 years, and he's up for re-election in just a couple of more weeks. Frank is a former business executive, has served in the New Hampshire House of Representatives, has served as a City of Manchester alderman, and was a very successful mayor of the City of Manchester, where he became very well known for his ability to bring accord to all of the warring political factions on every side of the fence over there, and for ending an era when property taxes were increasing pretty significantly year after year. He brought a stop to that. Now, I'm not going to use up a lot of valuable time today to repeat all of the details of Frank's extensive resume, but I will ask you to refer back to a show that we did just a few weeks ago, and you'll be able to hear all about it then. Simply go to the BCTV website at www.bedfordtv.com, click on today's schedule for channel 16, and in the search box in the upper left, just type in Tell It Like It Is and look for the show titled A Special Visit with Congressman Frank Guinta with a taping date of August 20th. Now, Frank does have a Democratic opponent to his re-election bid, and that would be Ms. Carol Shea Porter, who was voted out of her congressional seat by New Hampshire voters 2 years ago. Ms. Shea Porter will not be appearing on this show to express any opinions. In fact, she actually ignored 2 invitations to do so. Now, Ms. Shea Porter did appear here back in August, but within 1 hour of what was a civil and polite interview, in which she was allowed to speak very long periods of time without interruption, she demanded that the show be dumped because she was unhappy that questions were asked about her congressional record, particularly with regard to her unilateral support for Obamacare. On that show, she outright lied about her efforts to impeach President George W. Bush. I refused to dump the show, but offered her the opportunity to come back and do a second show in which she could discuss her platform, assuming she was going to develop one. She refused to do that unless she received questions that I would ask in advance for her approval. Well, you know, that didn't happen. If you haven't seen that show, I do urge you to watch it. It's called Seeking a Return and is available on the BCTV website, and also available as a show titled 26 Interviews and Only One Bad Apple, that I subsequently did to discuss the censorship activities of Ms. Shea Porter, as well as information about her congressional term of which voters need to be aware. I'll make it easy for you. Instead of going through the BCTV website, at the end of the show, you'll see my email address. Send me an email and I will send you direct YouTube links, but watch the shows. With no further ado, I do want to welcome Frank Guinta and talk about where we're at in his campaign.
Well, thank you for having me back. I
Thank
appreciate
you
it.
for coming back.
Oh,
I
my
know
pleasure.
that you have been all over the district. It seems like every time I turn the TV on, somebody has a mic in your face. So now you're in the final days. How have you spent the last few weeks? And as you're traveling throughout the congressional district, what are people telling you about? What are you hearing the most?
It's been a great campaign for re-election. I obviously would like to return as the 1st congressional district representative, and I'm asking people to support my effort on Election Day. It has been a bit of a challenge for people economically. That's what I hear more than anything. Our economy is not moving in the right direction. Our unemployment levels continue to be extremely high, 43 months of 8% or higher unemployment under this president. A GDP that for Q2 was originally stated at 1.7, was reassessed at 1.3%. Most people probably know that in order to have any kind of real stability, real job growth, you need 4 to 5% growth for our economy. No real substantive reforms from this president relative to tax policy, relative to economic policy, and that is what people tend to talk to me about as I travel around the district. And they're concerned, and they should be concerned, not just for themselves, but for also their kids' future and their grandkids' future.
Absolutely. Well, you know, in your first term, you were involved in some pretty profound issues, and just about all of them have long-lasting impacts. Tell us about some of the key issues in which you've had a role and what people really need, what messages the voters really need to hear about them.
Well, if you remember, 2010 was a real interesting election year.
Yeah.
You had 87 new freshmen Republicans that were elected. I think because people were frustrated with the direction that President Obama was taking the country, frustrated with the Democratic Congress and where they were taking the country. If you remember, they were pushing the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. They were spending more and more dollars, borrowing more dollars from China. We were going through QE1, QE2. We're now in QE3 with the Federal Reserve. So I think the country kind of stepped back and said, look, you know, we want to check on the president's policies, on the Democratic Party's policies. So we got into office and we did things immediately. Number one, I co-authored a bill, co-sponsored, excuse me, to repeal the Affordable Care Act. We passed that in the House. We passed not one but two spending cuts for our own offices immediately. We put a freeze on congressional pay. I took the earmark ban and basically said, look, we are going to bring New Hampshire values and New Hampshire sort of fiscal restraint to the conversation in Washington. And then we went on a whole host of legislative initiatives. Number one, passing a budget, not once but twice. We were passing our appropriations bills. We were looking at reforming the way Washington works, reforming how much money they spend. But all of these pieces of legislation that we would send over to the Senate, most notably the more than 30 jobs-related bills, most of which were passed bipartisanly in the House, still, you know, yet to wait action in the Senate because the Majority Leader Harry Reid has publicly stated on numerous occasions they're not going to take up these pieces of legislation. It's not good for the country. It's not a way to govern. It frustrates people in the country, rightfully so. So, you know, we need to continue what we started in 2010. Put good people in office, in the House, in the Senate, in the White House, who are going to deal with these fiscal issues and put our country back on track finally after years of stagnation.
It's been a wild ride.
It has been.
Yeah,
it has been.
for sure. You know, in never-ending blogs and in TV ads, your opponent has been continuously involved in what I think is a negative campaign. And has definitely put forth some multiple untruths. And what comes to my mind immediately and very recently is that I think she's been kind of malicious in suggesting that you have not been a supporter of our military veterans. Set the record straight on that and on some of the other stuff that's been floating around.
Well, Kathy, this started with the BIA debate, the Business and Industry Association debate, where we were both asked to focus on policy and substance. From the first comment she made in the debate, they were direct attacks on me. And she completed the entire hour with multiple attacks. And then the following day, this is now about 2-3 weeks ago, she ran an ad where she claimed that she supports veterans and that I had cut billions from veterans' benefits. Totally and completely false. And the bill that she's referencing is a bill, H.R. 2055. And she says that I voted for something called a motion to recommit. A motion to recommit is a procedural vote by the minority party to send the bill back to conference. So you dispense with that procedural motion, and then the regular bill comes back to the floor, which was passed 411 to 5. Not one Democrat voted against the bill. It was sent to the Senate, they passed it, signed into law by the President of the United States, increased veterans' benefits by $8 billion. Yet she claims that I opposed the bill and cut billions from veterans. Complete and total falsehood. And I would ask, you know, would she have been the one Democrat to vote against this bipartisan bill? One thing that, you know, I think most people get frustrated at is politicizing votes, but it's even worse when you politicize veterans. So there were a group of about 40 veterans who then had a press conference, really calling out the facts that she presented. And she did actually change her ad. It's still, you know, a false ad because the majority of it's still running. But this is the disappointing part of politics. People, I think, Kathy, want solutions. They want facts.
Yes, they do.
And they want the country to be represented by people who are going to get work done, who are going to be serious about these things, not trying to dismiss the work of somebody else. So I continue to focus my campaign on solutions, on ideas, and really listen to what people have to say in New Hampshire and how they want me to best reflect the views and values of my constituents. That's what I think is so critically important about being a United States representative. And unfortunately, many people forget that notion that you're supposed to be representing what other people want you to do. Now, they're going to determine who they want based on how they feel about you and the positions that you take, as they should. However, I come home every weekend, I come home every district work period, make myself very accessible. The office is very accessible. We make sure that we are listening to everybody in the district, and we try to do our very best to reflect those views and values from the 1st Congressional District when I vote and when I'm in committee hearings.
Well, one of the things I've noticed is that you don't hand out lottery tickets that would allow somebody to ask you a question at a public meeting like Carol used to do.
You know, we've had over 20 town hall style meetings and different areas of the state, different times. We really have tried to meet the different sort of needs of people. Some people don't want to come to a town hall meeting in the evening because it becomes it becomes a little frustrating to people.
Sure.
So we have them, you know, throughout the day. We have them in the evening, and we really try to get a good cross section of people to attend. And what I tell people is anyone's invited. Anyone can ask me a question. It doesn't matter what your party affiliation is, whether you support me or not. And I think that's part of your responsibility. So it's also important, I think, how you respond to somebody who may not agree with you. And that's fine. I mean, everyone's entitled to their own position and their own idea. But the fact that, you know, I'm able to reach out to somebody and say, look, come to these town hall meetings. Let's talk about a particular issue. Let me make sure that you're aware of what's going on. Let me make sure that if you have something that you want to convey to me, that I am there to listen to it. So, yeah, our town hall meetings are open. Anybody can come. Doesn't matter what, you know, their affiliation is, whether they're a voter or not. Anybody can come to these, and I think it's served the state in a constituent service perspective very, very well.
Well, I do remember back, particularly when the whole Obamacare issue was going on. My memory serves me correctly, I believe Carol even had people forcibly removed from some of these meeting rooms by the police because they had the nerve to question her thinking on Obamacare. And I know here in Bedford, there was a meeting up at the new high school, and I was not able to make it, but I heard a lot of stories later that it was ludicrous because she just did not want to face the people or answer their questions.
Well, the reality about the Affordable Care Act is that when this bill was put into law, there were statements made by, at the time, Speaker Pelosi, who said we have to pass the bill in order to see what's in it.
I know.
That, Kathy, frustrates people because you have a duty and a responsibility to know what you're passing.
That's right.
And at the time, if you remember, there was a lot of consternation about the bill. A lot of people didn't like this piece of legislation, and today more people don't like it than do like it. Compound that with the fact that it hasn't met its goals and objectives. The President set out objectives that we want to reduce the cost of health insurance and we want to create greater accessibility. I believe we haven't done either. When you talk to small business owners, job creators, you ask individuals if their premiums have gone up on the employer side and the employee side, expenses have gone up relative to health care. Also, we have 22 different taxes that are in this piece of legislation. You've got unintended consequences of this legislation.
Correct.
And I think that it's not the role of the federal government to dictate to Americans what product or service they are required to purchase. So I still believe it's unconstitutional. I disagreed with the United States Supreme Court decision. The one part of it that I did agree with is that they claimed under the Commerce Clause it was unconstitutional, which I agree, it is unconstitutional. What they ultimately stated was that it's constitutional because it's a tax, because there is a fee or a tax associated if you do not purchase health insurance. And it's rather substantial. It's a percentage of your pay that increases incrementally over the next several years. So call it what you want. Call it a fee, call it a tax. The reality is the IRS is going to verify that if you do not have health insurance, you are going to pay money to the federal government. I'll let people decide whether they want to call that a tax or a fee. The reality is it's money out of your pocket going to the federal government.
Absolutely. And one of the things that she was, you heard me mention at the opening of the show, that she was very disturbed with the questions I had asked her. And one of my questions did deal with one of those things hidden in that, 2,900 page bill that dealt with unearned income, a federal tax on it. That, and I never said would apply to all house sales, but could apply to some house sales.
Yeah,
and I mean, she basically was essentially denying all this. And my question to her was, how do you defend something like that, given the economy today, given the situation that people are selling homes because they have to, not because they want to? And that's only one example of Obamacare.
I think of there is a provision in the Affordable Care Act that certain people, if their home is a certain value when they sell it, has to pay a 3.8% tax. So here's the example that I sort of liken it to. Let's say you graduate college, you buy a home, and you end up staying in that home, raise your family, pay off your mortgage over 30 years, and when you retire, you decide you want to sell that home. So the value of the home over that 30-plus year period has grown.
Of course.
Which it should. This is an investment, not just a home, but it also turns out to be an investment for a family. So obviously you would like it to grow in value. And then you sell it, and it meets the requirements under the Affordable Care Act for you to then have to pay a 3.8% tax to the federal government. That, to me, is wrong.
I agree with you 100%, and I don't think most people ever had a clue that that was stuck into that piece of legislation.
This is the fundamental problem with this piece of legislation. As more and more people start to realize the effects of it, more and more people say, hey, it's not about health care, it's more about taxation. Now you have the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, that has rescored this piece of legislation after the United States Supreme Court decision. This was at the request of the United States Senate. The original cost of the bill was $800 billion. It is now $1.8 trillion. Oh. So when you think about our deficit today of about $1.2 trillion, you think about our long-term debt at $16 trillion, which is equal to our GDP. And then you think about this massive federal forced health care law that puts the federal bureaucracy between you and your physician. You add these things up and you start to say, in addition to the unemployment rate being 8%, over 8% for 43 months, then you see the stimulus, and you see the money that's been borrowed from China, and then you see that Bernanke announced we're going through QE3 and buying back $40 billion a month in securities. Where is this administration? Where are people like my opponent truly helping the middle class, truly helping the economy to go in the right direction, to truly send a message to job creators and entrepreneurs, those risk takers who we want in the economy, that something's going to get better? So this is, I think, the fundamental problem that we face in this election is I think you have two very clear choices. Someone like myself who is going to focus on less regulatory requirements, that we're gonna reform the tax code so it's specific and long-term. We're going to repeal the Affordable Care Act so you don't have that burden as a business owner. And we're going to give you the predictability that you need as a business owner to grow your business and to have confidence that the federal government's not going to come in and tax you at a higher rate or put more mandates on you that cost more money. So rather than cutting employees, you are able to grow your business, add employees, and then you start to see our GDP grow from an anemic 1.3% to about 4.5, where I'd like us to be. And that would translate into better consumer confidence, and that would translate into about 250 to 275,000 jobs per year being created, as opposed to what you're seeing right now, which is somewhere between 100 and 125,000 every month, which doesn't even begin to address the needs, doesn't begin to address the underemployment rate and the unemployment rate, doesn't begin to address the number of people who fall off the roles of looking for a job. So I think most people have an idea of what they're going to do in this election. This is about the country. This is about the future, our kids' future, our grandkids' future, and which party or which individual is going to have a better understanding, a better command of how to get this economy moving back again.
You know, and I think there have been so many things that have amazed me about this whole election, and obviously it's a critical one on every level, from state all the way up.
Yeah, I agree.
And all of the things you're talking about are so far-reaching and so impactful on every family in this country, no matter what the income level is and such. And yet, we have your opponent writing blogs about Big Bird or Big Oil, focusing on, wow, are you for cutting some funding to PBS? And I read these things and I'm like, where is she? Are we living in the same country?
Yeah, that release, my understanding, came after the presidential debate,
right,
where I think the entire country, Republicans, Democrats, conservatives, liberals, all unanimously stated that Mitt Romney, won that that debate. So you saw a flurry of press releases, the day after, including from my opponent, who was accusing me of being against Big Bird because Mitt Romney talked about.
Somebody told me you hate Big Bird.
Yeah, well, I don't think I do, because my
you like
kids.
Elmo better though, right?
Well, my kids are 9 and 7. Okay, we don't tell any parent of a young child that they're against Big Bird. We love Sesame Street in our family. Our kids love it. But this is the reality of what the other side is talking about.
Exactly.
When we have serious fiscal issues, when you have companies that are hanging on by a thread because of this economy, when you have individuals, Kathy, who are unemployed for more than a year, people that I have personally met through the job, the Getting Granite Seniors Back to Work initiative that I've put together, the job fairs that I've had, that I've hosted over the state. I care specifically and deeply about these individuals, and I do it, and I show it in such a way that allows my office to help them in a positive way. And I think that's what the country's looking for, real leadership, whether it's on legislative issues or back here at home, and what can you do to help people get back to work? What can you help, whether it's a single mom or whether it's a veteran or whether it's someone, a father who's just lost his job, whose family is relying on that income, or a mom, whose family is relying on that income. Those are the people that I want to help, and those are the people that I have concentrated, my first term in Congress in helping, not just legislatively, but back here at home.
Well, to that, and you mentioned the job fairs. For those people who didn't see the first show we did together, why don't you talk a little bit about those? Because those were pretty darn good, especially the veterans ones.
Yeah, I put together something called Getting Granite Seniors Back to Work initiative. We had regional job fairs, a total of 6, 4 for just anybody who wanted to come.
Now those were in the past 2 months, correct?
No, in the past 18 months.
18 months, okay.
Over the course of my first term.
Okay.
4 of them were for anybody to attend. 1 was specifically for women, and 1 was specifically for veterans and their families. And the one about the veterans is very interesting. We did a survey and found that almost 50% of veterans coming home didn't have a job to come home to.
What a disgrace.
Imagine that. Yeah. You're fighting in Iraq or Afghanistan, tour of duty, sometimes you're second or third, and you come home and you don't have a job to come home to.
Yeah.
The least we can do is make sure that when a soldier, when a warrior returns, that they are taken care of, that they don't have additional stressors of where their income is going to come from. Easter Seals does something wonderful called Veterans Count that helps all of these veterans that come back. And the reality is there are needs that our veterans have, that our warriors have. So, I wanted to sort of augment what groups like Veterans Count is doing, and the wonderful work that they're doing, and trying to help veterans. So we had several hundred veterans come to this.
That many?
Oh yeah. Through the course of the day. I was there for most of the day as well, meeting with veterans. And I have to tell you the stories, Kathy, of people just coming up and saying thank you, to know that someone cares.
Yeah.
To know that someone doing something specifically for veterans. So it's turned out to be a great program. We've also done a lot of help. Again, regionally, I felt that you don't want to just come to one big job fair in a centrally located place, because there's people in all parts of the district that are unemployed, and they want to work in their neighborhood, in their in a community that's contiguous to where they live. So that's why we decided this regional approach, and it made great sense. And so long as people are looking for work and want us to participate in this manner, we'll continue to do it.
And it's great because you're able to bring some of the power of your office to a down-home way that is going to help people right on the spot.
That's what's really helpful, is using the office in a positive way. And that's what, maybe that's the mayor in me that wants to directly help people, but you can use the office in such a way that benefits the constituents.
Well, that's an experience, I think, that has done you very well going to Congress, because you are used to dealing on a face-to-face, person-by-person basis.
And while I'm the office holder, this is the people's office. And you want to do everything you possibly can to make sure that people have access to the office, and the office is doing something in a positive way for the constituents that I serve.
Well, believe it or not, we're down to our last couple of minutes. It flies.
It does.
I want you to look at the camera and tell people what it's all about. Tell it like it is, why they need to walk in there in November and give you that vote. Well,
thank you for having me on your show again, Kathy. And I also want to thank your viewers for listening. I am in my first term representing you as your member of Congress, and I have appreciated that opportunity with great humility. And I'm running for re-election because I want to continue to serve this district, to make sure that we have an economy that's moving in the right direction, to make sure that we have everybody who wants to be having a job that gets that job, to finally figure out a way to work with the other side of the aisle to get our deficit and our debt down, to make sure that we have a pro-growth economy, and to make sure that we see the country moving in the right direction. What does that mean? It means limited but effective and efficient government. It means being a better steward of taxpayer dollars than the person that I replaced. And I want to make sure that not just the people in Bedford, but the people of the 1st Congressional District know that they have great access to me, to our office. We'll continue to serve you, but I need your help, and I'd like your vote this November 6th.
Good job.
Thank you.
Well, listen, I can only wish you at this point Godspeed and strength through the end of this, because a campaign like yours is an exhausting event. I'm sure that you'll be happy to see Election Day come and go. Well, you never take it for granted. No, and I know. I want people to know that I ask for their support, I ask for their vote, and it's important. This is an important time for our country, and it's an important decision to make. Do you want somebody to return to Washington who's going to focus on borrowing money, on stimulus, on cap and trade, on the things that don't benefit our economy? Or do you want somebody who's going to be based on facts, a solutions-oriented individual, someone like myself who is going to focus like a laser on the economy? I think people in this district have appreciated how I've served them. But again, I don't take it for granted. I'd like their vote and I'd like their support for a second term. Well, let me ask you this. Will you come back on before the term starts to tell us what your plans are in January? I'd love to. Yeah, I'd be happy to. All right, great. Thank you so much for being here. Best of luck for the final. Okay, we are right on the wire now, and you've heard it, and I hope you listened closely to everything that you heard from Frank. And I guess I'd say to everything you didn't hear from his opponent. Because sometimes words unsaid tell it like it is too. So until the next time, thank you for watching. You tell it like it is. I will. And I think Mr. Guinta will too. Thanks. Till next time. Bye-bye.